Hi, this time I wanted to talk about using music in tabletop role playing games. This is a bit trickier than what one would normally expect when it comes to using music in any sort of game that you play at the table, board games, or anything at all. Even if you're just having a casual conversation with someone, you're not playing games at all, music sometimes has a great effect on the mood. A lot of you already know this. But when it comes to tabletop role playing games, because our hobby relies so much on immersion and atmosphere, music could actually play a vital part when it comes to enhancing or even disrupting the session. It is not necessary to include music in your tabletop RPGs, but I think that used in the right way, it's definitely an important thing to consider. But there are some pitfalls, some traps when it comes to using music, and I want to focus my video on that. I think that the first pitfall is the volume of the sound of the song, of the melody. If you play the music a bit too loud, and this doesn't mean that you're going to be blasting the music into someone's ears. It just means that the volume of the music is almost at the same volume of your voice when you are describing things as either a game master or as a player. Then that can be a bit disruptive because, in the case of the game master, you want to communicate things clearly to the players. So if the music is at the same level as your voice, perhaps they are going to be distracted by the music. And in the case of the players, you also want to communicate things clearly to the game master to get those bonuses and avoid those penalties because there was a mistake in your communication, because perhaps the game master became distracted with the song, etc. So I would recommend that you keep the music as low as possible. Again, a lot of you already know about this. I think this has been mentioned in several books, particularly I think the old World of Darkness books, Vampire the Masquerade and Werewolf. They mentioned that you should keep the volume a bit low. But there is another very important consideration. And in this case, I think a lot of people may not be able to identify it. And this is the underlying theme of the tracks that you are using. Whenever possible, it's much better to use the soundtrack. If you have like the official or original soundtrack for a particular role-playing game or setting, for example, you can find soundtracks for the 13th Age, this campaign setting for Dungeons and Dragons 5th edition, Nightfell, for Cult Divinity Lost, The Dark Eye. They are all complete soundtracks. They are actually very good. I have them all, and I will talk about why they are really good. Well, I think I need to analyze the 13th Age soundtrack a bit more, because when it comes to fantasy soundtracks, sometimes they can feel a bit generic. Once you've heard a fantasy soundtrack, sometimes you feel as if you have heard them all. That is not always the case, and there are some marked examples of this. But yes, you are looking for that underlying theme. Now, I'm going to give you a somewhat ambiguous example, because if you make the connection to what I am referring, it looks like I am harshly criticizing a YouTuber that makes really good music for role-playing games. But I think that in his case, and you can identify this in any other soundtrack, it feels as if that composer is losing the grasp or his hold on the underlying theme. So let's say that you want to run a vampire-themed role-playing game or module. So you're looking for options here in YouTube, and suddenly you find, oh, this soundtrack was inspired by that role-playing game or by that module, and you think, oh, that's amazing, I just have to play that set of tracks, and everything will feel gloomy and vampiric and mysterious, gothic, decadent. But then you start to listen to the tracks, and they feel quite disconnected from each other. Some of them feel a bit too heroic. It's just too heroic for a vampiric atmosphere. But then we have the amazing soundtrack for Francis Ford Coppola's Dracula, Bram Stoker's Dracula. That soundtrack is so great for horror role-playing games, for any horror role-playing game, module, setting. It's perfect for Ravenloft, of course. So if you decide to use that original soundtrack, you're going to notice that each track in that album, it's scary. Even if a particular track is focused on a peaceful scenario, like, for example, the Lucy's party in the movie. Maybe you remember it, when she's meeting with the suitors, and you have this very elegant setting. And even though it's an ambience, as a moment of tranquility, the track for that particular scene, it's still very creepy. It sounds like something that you would play during a haunted dollhouse scene. You know, like perhaps the player characters are entering this room, this abandoned children's room, and there is this dollhouse left there covered in cobwebs and dusty and perhaps a bit broken, and you could play that specific tune to it. And even though it's a tune that is supposed to represent tranquility, peace, there is a certain discordance or perhaps melancholy in the combination of notes and the silence between the notes. And you are thinking, wow, this track could be used in any other horror situation. And why is this so key when it comes to using it in a tabletop role-playing game? Well, first of all, because you don't want to break the atmosphere. You don't want to ruin the atmosphere. You don't want that moment where everybody is really into the game and you have these tracks that jump from heroism to drama to comedy. That's going to ruin the entire thing. But the other reason why you want this underlying theme is that it could be more comfortable for the game master to not to switch tracks during the game. It can be a distraction. If you're constantly, oh, they are moving to this other scene, and you change the track, and oh, they did this, now it's combat starts, and you change the track, and that can be a bit distracting. So I personally find it more comfortable to just put the complete album or the soundtrack and just let it play and let the game organically connect with each track. So that way, if the characters are suddenly exploring a graveyard and they go into this other moment where there is battle, or they go out of those creepy environments and they start to interact with the nobles of that particular village or the city or whatever, you still have that underlying creepiness to it. So seriously, just listen to that Bram Stoker's Dracula original soundtrack. There is actually an extended version available here in YouTube. It contains like I don't know if it's a rearranged version or they used tracks that were not employed in the film, but that's the best one in my opinion. And you're going to notice how all of the tracks are perfect. And like I said, it's just the transition from one track to the other is so beautiful. Suddenly you have this somewhat sad music, and then you have like song is sweetest. It's so like there is no separation, no division between each track. And that's what you are looking for in any role-playing game, any setting, any module. If you're going to be playing something high fantasy, high heroics, you want every moment to feel like that, larger than life. Even if a moment is about a social interaction, perhaps a bit mellow, you still want like these, perhaps drums on the background that at any moment a battle could begin, or a great plan, a grand opportunity will arise. So maybe you want in the background something like dun, 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 going a bit faster and faster, or it depends on what you are looking for. So that's what I am trying to communicate. When you're looking for soundtracks for your tabletop role-playing games, look for that underlying theme. Because, in my opinion, it's much better to play the music and let each track fall into place with the different scenes and encounters. And sometimes it's quite fun when you're playing and your players suddenly point out after the session, it was great when we were we were going into this laboratory or this bunker or this space station, and out of nowhere the album switched to this music that sounded a bit like technology gone wrong or biohazard experiments, and it fit the situation so well. So yes, definitely consider that when you're using music in your tabletop role-playing games. I will also like to hear your thoughts on this. Have you been using music in your tabletop RPGs? Do you like to play it at a low volume? Do you want to... Maybe you create your own playlist? Or do you use an original soundtrack, as I mentioned, a complete album? Let me know your techniques, your experiences using music. Maybe you don't like to use music. That's also valid. Maybe you like to use sound effects. I actually never use sound effects when it comes to, yes, for example, someone casts a spell or there is a fight going on, unless there is something constant. For example, if there is an ongoing war, you're fighting in a battlefield and there are wizards shooting spells everywhere, then perhaps I would use like a repetition or a loop of various magical sounding effects. Or if it could be like a low fantasy or semi-realistic, pseudo-historical situation, then you only want the sound of metal swords clashing against armor and shields on the background, perhaps the sound of someone screaming as he or she is dying, then that's also valid. It could be considered like using music at a low volume. So I really want to know your experiences using music in tabletop role-playing games. Thank you for watching this video. If you have any comments or questions, please let me know. Thank you for your likes and your comments. If you have any questions or comments, please let me know. And thank you so much to those of you that are going the extra mile to support the channel. If anyone else wishes to further support the channel, the information on how to do that will be in the description below. Once again, thank you, and see you later.